Hey, how's it going out there? This is Anthony Cordova, and today we are talking about how I spray show quality candy paint step by step. We're breaking down the process of candy paint for a flawless uniform finish. So before I go into my process, I wanted to give you a quick definition of what candy paint is, and also I wanted to give you a little history of candy paint and some of the candy paint jobs that I've done. You're looking at one right here right now. This is the 1976 Le Mans that I've shown on my channel in a video. I think it's titled Taking the 1976 Le Mans Lowrider to Show. And this car was done by me and my mentor in 1998 originally. It was the same kind of design, and one of my mentors at Pinstripes, two guys that I got mentored by, actually one helped me paint this or painted it and I helped him, and then the other put the graphics and pinstriped it originally. And then this version here is what I did a couple of years ago, and it's same kind of design, but I've added way more graphics. So anyways, what is candy paint? Candy paint is a translucent paint over a metallic base coat to achieve a custom color. So in other words, it's a 3-stage paint job where you have a base color, you have a translucent color, or like something like a tinted clear over a base, and then you have your clear. So that's why they call it a 3-stage paint job. Color selection will depend on the color you are going for in the end. So if you want a darker candy, for instance, you would go with a darker base coat rather than doing a brighter base coat. Another thing is that silver and gold base coats are going to give you the most vibrant and most bright colors that pop the most. Whereas if you do, like, say, I've seen guys do gray, like in House of Color, which is a brand of candy paint, they have a base coat called Galaxy Gray. And I've seen a lot of guys do Galaxy Gray because it's a little easier to shoot and they look decent, but they're really dark. I mean, I think they look good. I wouldn't say decent. They look good, but something like this where you're looking at on the screen, you're not going to get that pop because this is actually a gold base coat, and then it's candy brandy wine over the top of that base coat. And of course you have all the different color graphics, and a lot of the graphics on this car where you see the bright red is silver base coat. And then you can see the purple on the trunk here, and that's like a purple base coat. And then I also faded some candies onto this paint job on top of the Brandywine paint job. So this is like a multicolor candy paint job right here. And this paint job has pearls over it as well. You can see the bright red kind of right in the middle, that kind of bright pink colors in there where there's like some fades going down the middle, and there's some other little designs on the inside of those other graphics there that look kind of pink or kind of like fluorescent. Those are a red pearl. I mean, no, actually that was a candy concentrate mixed with a pearl and a little bit of metallic just to give it a little sparkle. So pearls also look good on top, layered on top of candy paint jobs, but subtly, you don't want to put a bunch of pearl over a candy paint job because it just kills the effect of the candy. A little history about where candy originated from. So Mel Pinoli in 1955 was credited with the first candy paint job. He was out of San Leandro, Pinoli's Body and Paint in San Leandro, California. He experimented with ink toners because candies are a lot, the dyes in candies are a lot like ink dyes. If you really have messed with candies, or if you know, candy concentrates are like a dye rather than paint pigments. So it was said that he experimented with candy ink toners in the early 50s and then came up with a lacquer toner formula. This car here was actually painted with ink toners, but it had faded in a year. And candies do fade in the sunlight if you have them out in the sun too much. A lot of times, if you have a candy paint job out in the sun all the time, the candy will actually fade. No matter how much UV resistant clear or UV compounds you have in there to shield it, it's still going to fade. And like I said, he was credited with the first candy paint job, and it was on Frank Livingston's 1949 Fleet line. The first candy paint was by Joe Balon, and he was out of Hayward, and he was Balon's custom shop in Hayward, and this is his car, the 41 Chevy. It's named Miss Elegance, and I'm not sure, he had two versions of this car. I think this is a second version. So you had Miss Elegance 1 and Miss Elegance 2. I think this is the second version though. It took him 10 years of experimentation to develop the first candy paint that was sold on the market. The first offering was red over gold base, which I think is pictured here. And it was appropriately named Candy Apple Red. They still give out a Joe Balon Award for best candy at Sacramento Autorama. I actually painted a car that we tried to get I thought I was going for the best candy at Sacramento Autorama, but we ended up winning first in our class. We didn't get the candy award. I was kind of disappointed because I thought my candy was the best candy at the show, but the candy paint job that won was a red candy paint job, and it was super nice. When I looked at it after, I'm like, what car got the candy award? And it was a Candy Apple Red 1956 Chevy Bel Air, if I remember right, and it was beautiful. So I wasn't that mad after that. But here's his candy apple paint ad in probably Custom Rodder or something, one of those early magazines that was out back in the day, or Hemmings Motor News, or who knows. But this is his original ad for his candy paint that you could buy, the first candy paint that was ever kind of invented. Here's that car that I was talking about. It's a 1950 Merc that my late friend here, Wade Bozarth, owned, and I did all the body work and painted this Merc right here. It's candy cobalt blue over Orion silver, and we took this car in 2010 to the Autorama, to all the Pleasanton good guys, and we let's see. And we took first in our class. I forget what the class was, but at Sacramento Autorama, when we debuted this car, we took first in class. And this car was blocked and primed, and I did all the body work. It was all plastic filler. This is the first car that I've ever done where I lined up all the panels and put plastic filler all over this thing and blocked it with a long block from front to back, from top to bottom, and matched every panel. And we primed and blocked this car over and over again till we achieved the finish that we wanted, the surface that we wanted. And then we painted this thing with candy cobalt blue. As you can see right here is a true urethane candy. Here it is at the graffiti night, getting ready to go in the parade in the front of the line. You can see up in the other corner here, that's a 58 Impala from the movie Graffiti Night. And then behind the Merc is the 32 Chevy, or the Model A or 32 Ford that was in the movie Graffiti Night as well. But this year we actually won the Grand Marshal Award for Graffiti Night in Modesto, California. And we're here at the front of the line getting ready to go in the parade. Right here, this is my first candy paint job that I did in 1998. I was, how old was I? Thinking back, I don't even remember how old I was, but I think I was like 23 or 22 or something like that. I got to do the math in my head. I'm not real good at doing math in my head right away, but so this is the first candy paint job that I ever did in 1998. It was a gold base with candy apple red and some different fades and graphics, and then candied over as well. You can see right here, I said candy, like I said, it's candy apple red over gold base. Here's a different angle. This was actually a truck that used to go do competitions for beat or stereo system. Had 6 18-inch kicker woofers, all precision power, like 5,000 watts worth of stereo system and all kinds of stereo in it. Here is another candy I did back in like 2005. This is an organic green candy over an Orion silver base. Funny story about this car is, I'll break down my process, but this car, I got a little I would say I got a little too confident on this car, and on the trunk, I was in the middle of painting this thing, and I actually got some like light tiger striping. And anybody that knows, when you're painting a candy car, tiger striping is not what you want. You want a nice uniform finish. I ended up being able to save this car, but it took me having to stop and over reduce my candy a little bit, and fog and cross and really like baby this thing to get it to even out. So you can see on these candies that you really get a nice, what they call a flop. Like some angles it looks really light, and then some angles it looks kind of dark, and they just look really deep. Candy paint is great for graphics. Here you see I'm doing some Harley fenders. I did a Harley bike, a lowrider bike, and I did a bunch of fades and a bunch of patterns. You can see I have it taped up here for graphics. And here's the after. Kind of a bad picture because I had low quality phone back when I painted this thing. I think I was working with an Android phone, I don't remember, but here you can see there's some flake, and then there's the graphics underneath, and then I shot candy over the top of that. Here's another example. Here's a candy apple red over silver fades, and this is on a carbon fiber BMW trunk for an M3, and it's candy apple red over silver fades over carbon fiber. So you can see the carbon fiber kind of coming up through there, and then you see the silver fades and the candy over that. So I'm going to break down now the steps for how you paint candy or prep, and I'm not going to go into all the prepping of, because that would take forever. But just how do you go about prepping for candy? So prep for candy, complete paint job. For a complete paint job, you want to do in 400 to 600 grit finish sand. And I like 600 grit. Some guys do 400 grit. For completes, I always used a catalyzed sealer primer, especially if I'm painting over a substrate, which means like an original paint job with maybe like some primer spots where you did some body work. You always want to use a catalyzed primer, because especially when it comes to doing these, like I use House of Color paint, and when I'm doing a high dollar candy paint job, I use a whole system from beginning to end, meaning I use their primer, I use their sealer, I use their base, I use their candy, and I use their clear. Because if you ever have an issue, you can always call up the manufacturer and be like, hey, I had this issue. And most of the time they'll warranty, and not the labor, because I've had it happen to me before where I've had a candy paint job crack. They won't warranty exactly. Yes, I'm going to keep it up after it ends. I'm going to keep the live stream, the video up after it ends. I got a question here asking if I was going to keep the live stream up after it ends, and I am, yes. So I had an issue where I painted this Cadillac, and I used everything like they said. I had a procedures book that I still have from House of Color, and it tells you how to mix the paint. It tells you how to spray it. And I did everything exactly like they told me how to do. And it had a crack on it. So long story short, I was able to get a whole nother paint system, and they didn't warranty the labor, but they were able to warranty the actual paint. And they gave me some more paint. So always use the same manufacturer from start to finish. And like I said, I always use a catalyzed sealer primer underneath a candy paint job, just because, especially on House of Color, the solvents are really strong. And if you're not sealing what you have underneath, sometimes that strong solvent can pull whatever it is from underneath, and maybe you'll have like a Bondo stain where you see like the spots of Bondo. I've seen a lot of different things happen where they didn't use a sealer, and this solvent just pulled whatever was underneath and pulled it up and exposed it, or wrinkled it, or did whatever, and had a bad reaction. For base coat on a candy, you are gonna need, depending on the color and depending on the sealer you used, you're gonna need 4 to 8 coats of base until you achieve a uniform coverage for completes. 4 to 8 coats of base coat. Always do a test pattern from the beginning, meaning that you put a piece of paper on the wall, a piece of masking paper or cardboard or whatever, and you make sure that your gun's doesn't have an uneven spray pattern. And my rule of thumb is to do a 6 inches from the wall, and make sure your pattern's about 6 inches as well. In base coat, you start to walk your panels in base coat, because you're going to have to walk this car or panel or whatever you're painting. When it comes to candy, you have to walk the whole panel, meaning you have to start from the front of the car and walk all the way to the back of the car, front to back. That's how you spray a candy. Walk your panels during candy application. I just said a little bit about that, but you want to figure out your pattern ahead of time. I always start to walk my paint job in base coat so that you know, and you get a good feel for the pattern that you're going to lay on this car or whatever you're painting. Regulate air pressure, speed, and distance from the panel. You always want to make sure that this is always the same. If you have trouble remembering, write it down. Make sure that you have a pressure gauge on your paint gun and you always regulate the air pressure, the speed, and the distance from the panel. Because if, say, you have a panel that's off the car, like you have a urethane bumper or whatever, and it's off the car, you want to make sure that you have that same kind of speed and same air pressure, because all that stuff matters with the candy. It will change the color of the candy. Make sure your spray pattern is even is critical. Making sure your spray pattern is even is critical to success. Like I said, your spray pattern should be 6 inches from the wall and 6 inches from top to bottom. Always read manufacturer's mixing guidelines. Not saying always follow them exactly to a T, because there's tricks that you can do to make sure to ensure that you have a nice candy paint job, but always read the mixing guidelines. For my candies, what I do is I over reduce my candy by 50% on my first couple 2 to 3 coats. I start with light coats on the first few coats, and then I progressively add less reducer and more saturated coats, meaning that my first 2 coats are going to be, so for House of Color, because I know it by the back of my hand, is 2 to 1 to 1, right? So House of Color is 2 to 1 to 1. So that means that it's 2 parts candy, it's 1 part catalyzer or hardener, and 1 part reducer. Well, I'll do 1.5 reducer, and then I'll kind of step back a little bit, or I'll put lighter coats on to start, just to get it, because you can have issues with candy where because it's wet material, it's like clear coat, where you might get like some contaminants or whatever. But if you kind of get a nice like tack coat on there for the first couple coats, and then progressively slow down or get closer to the panel, and then put more like a medium coats on as you go along, that's for me always been the key to always having a consistently nice candy paint job. I will, like it says here, I'll progressively add less reducer. So like on the 4th or 5th coat, I might only add just like 10% more reducer than the manufacturer's mixing guidelines. So it might be like 2 to 1 to 1 and just 10% more reducer. And then like as I'm going to like my 5 and 6 coats, I'm just going exactly 2 to 1 to 1 and slowing down and kind of putting more material on. And you'll start to see these candies kind of even out. You'll see at first they look super blotchy and they look terrible, and you're like, oh my God, this thing's ruined. But little by little, you'll start to see it starts to even out. And the more you put on there, the more it'll even out. Check tack times and recoat windows religiously. I cannot stress this enough. You have to check tack times and recoat windows. The rule of thumb is wherever you painted last on the paper next to where you painted last. So say if you're like, the way I start my candies is I start on the roof. I start on one side of the roof. I do the roof. I come to the other side of the roof, and I might go down the sail panel where the window's at, where your quarter window's at. And then I make sure my roof is all done on that one side. I go to my other side of the roof, and then I will coat the other side of the roof, and then I'll do the side. Actually, I'll do the hood, and then I'll do the trunk, and then I'll do the sides. Well, wherever I ended, like say I ended like on the left fender by the headlight, well, where that headlight's at, I will make sure that I test that masking paper is at. So in other words, like where your headlight would be, there's masking paper there. I'll make sure that I touch that. And you always want on a candy, especially urethane candy, you always want it to be tacky, where it's just like tacky, where it like sticks and sticks to your finger, but not string. Excuse me. Not stringy. So if you touch the paper and the candy sticks to your finger and you lift up and it just tacks and it just is like sticky but not stringy, then you can add another coat or start your next coat. But if it's stringy, where like you lift up and there's little strings coming off your finger, that means that it's still not tacked up enough or not set up enough for your next coat. You have to be religious on this, and you have to be kind of exact on this, because what ends up happening on these candies, you either get like heavy on the edges, so everywhere your edge is at, you get like a heavy edge, and your edges will be darker, or you get a run in the candy, and that's the worst thing you could do, because excuse me. That's the worst thing you could do, because that is not fixable. At that point, you stop, you sand the run out, and you start over. You start it over in base coat. You sand the whole thing again, and you start over. Once you get a running candy, it's not fixable. It's done. You're done with that paint job for that day. You might as well just call it a day and start over. Excuse me. Here again, I'm saying be patient and check the last panel you sprayed. Like I said, whatever the last panel is that you sprayed, that masking paper next to it, that's where you check. Depending on candy color and base color, you will put 6 to 12 coats of candy. It is not unheard of to have 12 coats of candy on a car. I know, because I've done it. Those cars with silver base coats, like that green one that I showed you and that blue one that I showed you, they have had 12 coats of candy on them. It's not uncommon for it to take 12 hours or more in the booth when spraying a complete. And that is word is bond, because I've been there. You start these candy paint jobs early in the morning, like at 5 or 6 o'clock, because you're going to be going all day. You might take a little break to eat something, but you're going to be going all day, especially if you're using a light base coat. If you're using a similar color base coat, like you're doing red base and red candy, not as big of a problem. You're still going to probably put like 6 coats of candy to make it look nice and even. But if you're using a red like over a silver, or a green over a silver, or anything over silver, anything except for like gold or something like that, where they're pretty, some of those golds or some of those other colors are kind of forgiving. But anything like green, I don't know why green and blue and red and all these bright colors, you're gonna be in that booth for 12 hours. No joke. 50 to 75% overlap. What I mean by this is, on your sides and on your regular panels when you're painting, you want 50% overlap. So wherever your pattern is, when you do one pattern, you want to be halfway into the next pattern to get a nice even spray. You want on the centers, wherever you're doing your overlap on your, like say your roof, in the middle of your roof and the middle of your hood, you want 75%. So whenever I get to the middle of that hood or that roof or that trunk, wherever I'm at, I'm going to overlap even more onto the spray pattern that I started on the other side. So 75 on your middles, where your hood, your trunk, and your roof is at, and 50% on the rest. 2 to 3 coats of clear, and continue to check tack times religiously. I don't know how many times I've seen guys, or even me, where I'm all good. The candy's all beautiful. It's laid out all even and it's all nice. And then they come in and they don't let the candy tack up, or they don't let it tack up enough. Just plain and simple. They don't let it tack up enough. And they go and pound a bunch of clear on this thing, and the clear will literally grab that candy and start to make it sag. I've done it before and I've seen it done before. People get overzealous. Candy is a game of patience, and the longer you let that candy tack up and let it sit, and you have to realize that when you're spraying candy, the more candy you put on these things, like when you're on coat number 8 or coat number 10, it's going to take longer to dry. So you're going to have longer dry times in between when you're going to put on these next coats and keep adding coats. So the more material you get on the thing, the longer it's going to take to dry. So at the end, you get your candy all nice and uniform. It looks gorgeous. And then you wait, and then you put on 2 to 3 medium coats, and you always check your tack times religiously. Like I said, on a regular paint job, you're just spraying base and clear. No problem. Base is dry. If you painted base coat before, it goes on dry, and you get a run in your base, and it's not going to pull that clear down, that base down. You get a run in your clear, and it's not going to pull that clear down. It's just going to make a run in the clear. But since candy is wet on wet, which meaning like it's a clear coat with a tin in it and then clear coat, it will grab that candy and it will pull it down and it will run it, and it will make a dark run wherever your candy's at. If you run out of candy, because it's happened to me more than once, because you think it's too blotchy, like it's not covered enough, and you have like spots. What I mean by blotchy, if you never talked in paint terms, blotchy means like there's blotches of different colors, right? Or different shades. Or you run out of time, say you're renting a booth, or it starts to get cold and you don't have a heater or whatever. You can stop and you can come back, put 1 or 2 coats of clear on this thing and let it sit overnight, and come back the next day and keep adding candy. You can do that it says with candy after sanding the clear. You can come and recoat with candy after sanding the clear with 600 to 1,000 grit sandpaper. I've done it before. On that Merc that I showed you earlier, we ran out of candy. We thought we had enough, but it just wasn't covered to our liking. So we actually stopped because it was getting late. It was like 7 or 8 o'clock at night by the time we got to that point. And we called around. It was crazy because where we live, there's not a lot of people that carry House of Color candy. So we called around, and man, we pulled all our resources, and we ended up finding somebody that had some candy, and we bought 2 more quarts. And the next day we came back, we sanded the thing down. I put a coat of clear on it, and we came back and I lightly sanded the whole thing with 600 while it was still in masking paper. And I ended up recandying it and covering with more candy and then clearing it. And that's how we got it done. For candy, because you're going to put so much material on this thing, it's going to be a rough finish. It's not going to be a nice finish in the beginning when you first get done. Even after you put your 2 to 3 coats of clear on, you're going to put those coats on medium. You're not going to put them on heavy like you're doing a regular paint job and it has a nice finish. And because of that, you're going to have a orange peely finish. So what you do is at the end of your paint job, that first initial, when you're doing your candy and your clear, you put on 2 to 3 coats of clear. The next day, I leave them all masked up. I come back, I hit them with 600 myself, and then I re-clear it and add like 4 coats of clear. And there is when, after that is when you can sand and polish. Here's another picture of that Orion silver with candy organic green paint job here. This is after I came back and re-cleared it and then sanded and polished it. And that's the kind of finish you can get. For graphics, prep for graphics over clear is 800 to 1,000 grit finish sand. So with candy, what's cool about candy is it's super transparent. So if you're doing a panel or doing a car or whatever, you can put your base coat on and you can literally add a bunch of different graphics or whatever, and then come back and put candy over that, and you're going to see all those graphics underneath. So a lot of times guys will like either flake out a car or doing whatever, and then they'll put on a bunch of clear and then come back and sand that clear with 800 to 1,000 and then start adding graphics and then come back and candy over that. And then you have all your graphics underneath your candy, and that looks pretty cool, like kind of like ghost graphics. Multicolor candy graphics is kind of a different beast. So like say you have a black car and you want a bunch of different candy colors over that black car. I like to use similar color base coats for my candies for faster coverage, because you don't want a big old thick line that you're going to have to cover later with clear. For candy graphics, you use Intercoat Clear mixed 1-to-1. On the manufacturers for House of Color, it says 2-to-1, but I've had so many issues where I've added 2-to-1 as far as 2 parts Intercoat Clear and 1 part reducer, and they've cracked because they get too heavy and too thick, and that stuff for some reason it just wants to separate. I've had issues with this. So if you're doing Intercoat Clear from House of Color, I recommend do 1-to-1 unless you're just doing like 1 coat. I've done it, and they say you can do up to 4 coats, but I've done it where I've done 4 coats and it's cracked. So I recommend 1-to-1 as far as 1 part Intercoat Clear, 1 part reducer. And then I take my candy concentrate, because for graphics you want to use candy concentrate, not catalyzed regular candy. And I mix that 8 parts, so 8 parts of the candy concentrate to the 1 part of the mixed Intercoat Clear for graphics. A simple trick that I use is to add some candy concentrate to my base coat for faster coverage. So if I'm doing like say a red graphic, right, and I'm doing it over like a silver metallic because I really want it to pop, instead of just putting that silver metallic on and just trying to cover that with like say red candy, I'm going to take that silver metallic and I'm going to add a little bit of candy concentrate to that, and it'll give it like a pink tone, but it's going to help you, because again, you don't want to have these big old thick graphics and then have to come back and try to cover those graphics with clear, because it's going to take a lot of clear and a lot of sanding and a lot of trying to level that stuff out. The goal is 4 to 6 coats for solid graphics, meaning if you have like a stripe or a line or something that you want to do, you want no more than 6 coats, meaning base coat coverage and candy coverage. The less buildup, the better for bearing graphics with clear. Here's an example of a car that I did. It is gold base, and then I did a bunch of candy graphics over the top of it. You can see there's orange, there's gold, there's a bunch of different things going on in the graphics on top of inside of the graphics. So that's an example of what I mean by solid color graphics. A lot of the colors aren't just fades, they're actually different colors on top of colors. Multicolor base coat graphics under candy, optimum number of coats is 2 to 4 coats max. What I mean by base coat graphics is, like I said before, you have a paint job that you're going to do candy over the whole thing, and you want to do some graphics in base coat. You want to minimize the lines of your graphics or the buildup of your graphics. So you just want like 2 to 4 coats max. So a lot of times I'll do fades or different little things to, like I'll tape out a design and I'll just take the airbrush and I'll fade around it. That's called like a faded line, and then I'll do like stenciled little things inside of graphics, or inside a design, and then I'll candy over that. I myself personally like to sandwich my graphics in between layers of candy for more visual opacity, meaning like I might do a complete paint job where I'll do base coat, candy, and then I'll put like 4 coats of candy on it, and then I'll do my graphics, and then I'll come back and put like 4 more coats of candy, so that my graphics are actually sandwiched in between the layers of candy, not just on the bottom underneath. Like I said, get creative, do stencil painting inside graphics for more visual effect. Adding pearl graphics over candy paint sometimes looks great too. I showed you earlier an example of that. Adding some metal flake can look good as well, over the top or underneath. If you're doing metal flake over the top of your candy paint job, make sure that your metal flake is the same color or similar color to the color of your paint job that you're doing. Nothing looks goofier to me than if you have a red paint job with like silver metal flake over the top. I don't know why. I don't like it, but some of you might like it. I don't think it looks cool. If you're doing metal flake under the candy, so in other words, if you're doing base and then metal flake and then candy over the top of that, make sure that your candy is, make sure that your metal flake is lighter than the base coat that you use. So in other words, if you're doing like gold base, you want to use silver flake. I know from experience, I did a gold base paint job on one of my first cars. I want to do candy tangerine. I did gold base, and for some reason I thought, oh, red flake will look cool. But anytime where those red flakes landed wrong, or they didn't land perfectly, or they landed on the side, like say they didn't land flat on the surface, or they landed like this, where it was like on top, like and standing up, those metal flakes, they looked black. So they looked like black little specks on my paint job. I ended up calling around, because it was my first time ever doing metal flake on a paint job. Luckily, it was my car, so I ended up sanding the whole thing down, doing silver metal flake over gold base, and then candying, and it looked right. So always make sure you use a lighter color metal flake over the top of your base. So if you're doing like a charcoal base, do like a gold metal flake or something light like a silver. I always like using silver metal flake under candy because it gives the most reflection. Here's another example of a graphic candy paint job, like I was saying. So this is what would be like a base coat graphic candy paint job. So I added the silver base, I added some flake. Actually, this one I added some graphics, some red tones, and you see some silver here, and some darker grays, and then also some reds, and then I candied over it, and that's what you get. And I think on this one you can see I layered my metal flake over the graphics, over all the graphics, and then I did the candy over that. Again, sorry for the bad pictures, but this was like when I had an Android phone way back in the day. This here is like what I was talking about, where I like pancaked my graphics inside my candy. It was on this. This is a funny story. This is the first car that I ever painted. First car candy or truck lowrider that I ever painted candy back in like 1998. This thing, because I went to John Kosmosky. He was the original guy from House of Color, the inventor of House of Color candy paint. I went to his class up in Stockton. He had a class at the San Joaquin Delta College or something, I forget. But anyway, he had a class out there for House of Color, and he did a hood, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you can totally cover these candy paint jobs in 4 coats." And I thought, well, I bought a gallon of candy. This truck right here was a gold base with candy apple red, and I bought a gallon of candy apple red. I bought a gallon of gold base and clear and everything, and I put 4 coats on it of candy over this gold base, and it looked like crap. I thought I ruined it. I was like, what the hell? And funny enough, one of my mentors, Larry Fierro, shout out to him. I called him up because he's the one that taught me how to paint, and he's the one that actually kind of broke down how to paint candies because he used to do them all the time back in the day. And I was talking to him, and I was like, what the hell happened? It doesn't look right. He's like, just try adding more candy. Maybe buy another gallon of candy and keep going. It just looks too light to me. So I was going to do this car initially with just straight candy. And I got this bright idea, and I said, you know what? Let me add some graphics to this thing. Now that I've got 4 coats of candy on it, let me add some graphics. So I did all these tape shades. You can see right here, I did a bunch of designs. And then I had Rico from Merced, Rico's Pinstriping. He's the one that actually did Strictly Business Dose, the lowrider of the year, like in 2000 and whatever, for Manuel Corbala's Strictly Business if you're into low riding. And he's done a bunch of lowriders out of the Merced area, from like Cardenales Unidos, all these guys. But a car that he did that's pretty famous was Strictly Business Dose by Manuel Corbala. He did that paint job, or did all the graphics on that thing and pinstriping. Anyway, I graphicked it, put all these fades on there, did all these graphics. He came out and did some airbrushing and did the pinstriping on this truck. And then I put 4 more coats of candy over this thing, and this is the result that I got right here. So this truck is actually 4 coats of candy over gold base, candy apple red, graphics, pinstriping, then 4 coats of candy over that. And that was actually a happy accident. That's how happy accidents happen. I thought I'd ruin this truck, but I was able to put graphics on, and they were able to kind of come through even more. Thanks for watching. If anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat. I'm going to be here for a minute, I guess. And if not, then I'll end it here. But this is the last little clip. Any questions? You can see this is the latest and greatest right here that I did. This thing, I just got done with this Le Mans it's been about 2 years since it's been done. And it is candy brandy wine over gold base. And then I've got a bunch of different, all those graphics in the middle there and on the side are all candy, different color candies. In the middle there, hey, my old lady kicked me out. I'm sleeping in. A Rolls Royce. What's up, my boy Vic? My boy Vic just jumped on right now. I went to the graffiti show, and I seen your car, but you weren't nowhere to be found. I was there for a minute. My boy has a 61 Impala convertible, and he was at the graffiti show. The first graffiti show started today. I'm out here in Modesto, California, so today was the first graffiti show in Modesto at the McHenry Village, and his 61 Impala was out there, and I walked around there a little bit and seen some people that I knew. But like I said, this thing has multicolor graphics on it. In the center there's a little bit of violet candy. There's a little bit of I forget even what candies I used on this thing, but it's got a bunch of different color bases and candies. This guy. I know, bro. I should have called you. I don't know. I was walking around with my old lady, and it was hot, so we just like walked around real quick and then dipped out. But I seen the 61 out there looking clean. But yeah, this is the last candy that I did. That 58 that I'm building right now is not gonna be candy. It's gonna be black. So So I don't know when my next candy job is gonna be. It is the baddest. See, I should have used water drops on this one. uh, yeah. So. Anyways, who knows when I'll do another candy? But I wanted to drop some knowledge on you guys, and give you a rundown of how you can paint candies, and what the procedure is to actually do a candy paint job. I don't know if there are any painters out there, or if anybody's painted any candies or done any candy paint jobs, but that's the way I do it. I know some people do it differently, or there's people out there that have different procedures, and I've heard so many different things about doing candies, that from the old timers, and things you can't do or you shouldn't do, and over the time, if you're a painter or what have you, and you have your ways you do things, you develop a system over time. And I've been doing this for 30 years. So I've developed my system, and I've kind of broken it down here for you. I'm thinking about putting this all into maybe a course or something. If you'd be interested, drop a line down below, and I might do like a little ebook or some kind of digital content. Trust me, bro. Trust me. All right, bro. I'll see you later. Thanks for jumping on, man. That's my boy Vic right there. He's got his channel, Project Rebuild. I don't know if he just changed the name, but he's got some content on his channel. If you want to go check him out, his channel, I think it's called Project Rebuild, and he does a lot of. We actually work together. He's putting the LS in the 58 that I'm working on. He built the frame, and he's putting the LS, and he does a bunch of LS swaps and wiring jobs and complete AC retrofits and all kinds of stuff. He does a bunch of cool ass work too. So if you want to check his channel out. But that'll be it for the live. If nobody else has any questions, and I will make sure that this video is posted on my YouTube channel, so you guys can check it out at a later date if you didn't catch live. All right, man, I'm out. Thank you guys for watching and jumping on. Peace out.